Hey folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier, one pro wrestling and sports fan. Today we're going to discuss a recent audiobook listen of Mox, M-O-X, by John Moxley, he's known as, to the WWE fans. He was known as Dean Ambrose, of course. And so this was a book published in, I believe, 2019, 2020? I think there was some indications of COVID, just the beginning of COVID stuff in this thing. Yeah, because he talks about the exploding barbed wire match, or the exploding ring match with Kenny Omega at Daly's Place. So definitely there's some COVID stuff. So I guess this is more like 2020, 2021. I listened to the audiobook version. I think it was about 3 weeks ago that I finished it. I listened to it relatively quickly. I think maybe 5 or 6 days I was done with it. A substantive book, a good book, a fun listen. I do respect the fact that Moxley reads his own book. I have a big thing with audiobooks. I'm a big audio book guy. Audible back in the days, CDs, audio cassettes, what have you nots. Some of my best book adventures as a reader have been through audio, so I'm a big fan of that. And it's great because if you're driving and if you're, don't want to listen to music or podcasts or whatever the fuck, you listen to an audiobook. And I think podcasts owe a lot of their success, quite frankly, to audiobooks. Let's get on with the show. Now, first of all, you might be saying, well, gee whiz, Mike, I didn't know you were such a Moxley fan. Well, I am and I'm not. I mean, I think of the three Shield guys, I think Moxley has always been my favorite. He's always appealed to me the most. I'm not a huge, I respect Seth Rollins' work as a wrestler, respect the fact that he knocked up Becky Lynch. Roman Reigns, I'm kind of ambivalent towards. I do think Roman Reigns will break the Bruno record, as I've discussed in another video on this channel, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm cheering for it. But Mox, I think what I like about him, especially after listening to this audiobook, is that Mox does feel like a throwback. And, several years ago, and I probably should have bought it at the time, because I did have an offer for, $5 from my friends at Top Rope Promotions, Steve Ricard, the promotion that hosted Scott Hall when he had his infamous breakdown as illustrated on ESPN. But I had the opportunity to buy a little box set of Dean Ambrose action figure and Brian Pillman action figure. I passed. I probably should have bought it. But anyway, so we move on. But yeah, the point is, Ambrose or Rollins, not fucking Rollins, Ambrose or Moxley does feel like a guy from a different era, and I don't even think it's really like I don't think of him as like an Attitude Era guy. I think of him almost more like a late 70s to mid 80s guy, and the wrestler. This might shock some and offend others, but he kind of reminds me of Dick Slater. Like, I feel like if John Moxley was back in the 70s through the early 80s, mid 80s, I feel like he could have been like a Dick Slater. Like, he would have taken that role, like a guy that could wrestle a scientific match or a traditional wrestling match, or a guy that could do the hardcore stuff, the brutal stuff. A guy that's equally comfortable as a heel or a baby face. I think Slater was probably better off as a heel, and I think Moxley probably better off as a baby face, to be honest with you. A renegade baby face. I think he's a hard guy to hate. So the times that they've tried to make him a heel in AEW hasn't really worked. He could chop off Orange Cassidy's little finger and people would still be cheering for Moxley. And I know that that's like been a big feud recently, is Moxley and Orange Cassidy. They had that nice feud on a nice match on the pay-per-view a while ago, and then of course Moxley got injured. But in any event, I do feel like going into this thing, I was pretty sympathetic towards the John Moxley cause. I mean, I wasn't a big Total Divas fan, but I did catch a moment on the Total Divas show 5 or 6 years ago where it's Moxley, at the time Ambrose, his wife or his fiance at the time, Renee Young. They're sitting at some outdoor eating restaurant with Renee's parents, and Renee's wearing like some hat, and I think it may be a cowgirl hat or some kind, and some asshole, I don't know, maybe this was rigged, maybe this was planned, scripted, but because it's reality TV, which a lot of it is scripted, but some guy walks by their table as they're sitting outside, just a non-restaurant patron, and literally takes the hat off of Renee's head and proceeds to leave with it. And Moxley gets up and he charges after the guy and gets the hat back. And Renee's all embarrassed and flustered. And her father's all fucking impressed because the man that's fucking his daughter chased down a hat that was stolen off her little princess head. Now, granted, now that I talked about that, I mean, who knows? It could have been a scripted thing. They could have, you know, even if Moxley and Renee and the father didn't know that was going to happen, maybe the producers of the show, you know, paid off the random asshole to steal the hat. Who knows? Just to create some television stuff for us. It's all a work. So we go back to this book. Now, book. Moxley, one little, you know, he's got a couple of little things that he weaves in here. It kind of reminded me of Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. If you're looking for a celebrity book to listen to, and McConaughey's Green Lights book is pretty good, and he reads his book too, McConaughey. So McConaughey in his book does these things where every once in a while he'll just start saying like bumper sticker, or like he'll just go you know, life lesson, and then he'll tell some little anecdote or whatever the fuck. That's McConaughey. So Ambrose in his book has these little bumpers, and they're either Cesaro jokes, you know, like Claudio Castagnoli or Cesaro. He'll tell anecdotes or actually jokes from him. One of them I remember, one of the Claudio jokes is, these days there's not a lot of guys around named Lance, but back in the Middle Ages, guys were named Lance a lot. So he's got all these cornball kind of dad jokes or whatever the fuck, Cesaro jokes, which is kind of fun. And then he does these things that I thought were pretty interesting. He has these little mini movie reviews. Now, if you're a subscriber to my other channel, one of my other channels, One Mike Messier, you've seen Mike's Instant Movie Reviews. I do all these wonderful movie reviews of wonderful films, and or bad films, and so I can appreciate a guy who has some thoughts on movies, and he's going through and he's naming movies. One of them I don't need to watch it. I think I do want to watch it. He describes it. I think it's called Presumed Innocent or Innocent Bystander or whatever the fuck. It's like some courtroom drama thing or whatever the fuck. So that sounded pretty good, but he does like kind of do these little blurbs of his favorite movies. I think he lists all types of movies, some comedies and stuff. But the one that I was happy to hear, Mox, and so that's why I toast you with my cherry vanilla fucking prebiotic drink, is Highlander, 1986. So, and honestly, like listening to Mox and his thoughts on Highlander, it was like listening to my own thoughts on the movie Highlander. It's a great movie. It's very exciting. There's even some pro wrestling in it. The Fabulous Freebirds versus Greg Gagne, Jumping Jim Brunzil and the Tonga Kid, who's a bloodline ancestor. From the Meadowlands, they call it the Madison Square Garden. The movie is actually filmed at the Meadowlands at one of the AWA Pro Wrestling USA shows. And he kind of says he gives a pass to Michael Hayes for all his crazy bullshit in the WWE because of the fact that the guy's in the movie Highlander. So I like that. He does tell a funny self-depreciating story of him buying a little motor scooter for Renee, and he wanted to surprise her with it, and his sister was there for this gift giving to his wife. I guess it was Renee's birthday. And so Moxley like rides the little scooter out of storage himself, and then he proceeds to flop head over heels on it and hurt himself. And but I guess he wasn't too badly hurt. So he tells some self-depreciating stories. He talks about growing up in the hood. I mean the projects, or whatever you want to call it, low-income housing. Not even having the money to go to the wrestling matches with his friends, which is kind of sad. And, the friends in the neighborhood that introduced him to wrestling. And like many of us, he was first exposed to WWE, but then they got him into Crockett Promotions, NWA stuff. So it's kind of cool. It's like a cool thing that he has all these wrestling memories as a fan. And then he's in Ohio, and I guess was he's in Cincinnati. Was it Heartland Wrestling Association that he came across? It wasn't OVW. I think it was Heartland. And they're doing like these shows, and he's seeing like all these amazing wrestlers, and of course he doesn't know who most of them are at that point, but he decides to just, you know, do it. He comes in, he's still underage. I guess he lies about his age, but he starts getting, you know, they let him be a kind of a young boy for this group, like he's sweeping up the tables or the floors or the chairs or whatever the fuck, until he finally gets put into a battle royal. So it's very, you know, reminds me of stuff that I've been through, stuff that other wrestlers have been through. Not that I'm another wrestler, but I mean, I have had a few matches. But I mean, just, it's an interesting listen because a lot of it is very relatable, okay? So, his passion is there. He talks a bit. He does, I mean, if you really want to hear the story of him leaving WWE, the best thing to listen to is his Jericho broadcast, like his guest spot on the Chris Jericho podcast. I guess that was in 2019 when Ambrose was leaving or left WWE. So find that if you really want to hear the dirt on Vince and everything else. He does talk about that leaving, you know, how he just felt totally unfulfilled. He felt like he was not being used properly, that they didn't really get him anymore, or maybe they never did. He does talk about that failed angle with Mick Foley. It was kind of a pseudo work shoot, you know, angle from years gone by that never happened because Foley wasn't medically cleared to wrestle. So there's a lot of good stories in this thing. He also, the other thing that he does, like, you know, McConaughey has his little breaks, you know, bumper sticker, you know, and so fucking Ambrose does his album reviews or kind of a CD or music suggestions. God, I'm the Krigley voice here. Sorry, folks. Yeah, he does his music reviews, and one of them, you know, I've heard the name Lana Del Rey. I've heard that name, but I haven't sat there and, I got to listen to Lana Del Rey. I mean, I think there was a female wrestler named Sarah Del Rey that was quite good, and of course, WWE hires her to be a trainer, not a fucking wrestler. Much like they're parading Nick Aldis around in a suit. In any event, I go and I find on whatever the fuck, YouTube Music or Spotify or whatever, this Lana Del Rey, Born to Die, or whatever her fucking music is. It's good, you know, but I mean, Moxley paints a portrait of him and the other wrestlers, you know, back in their, you know, FCW/NXT days, as they're coming up, you know, touring Florida, listening to different music, living in close quarters, you know, with other wrestlers. So, I mean, as far as the modern day wrestler, like wrestlers of Moxley's age and younger, I mean, this is about as, you know, close to Mick Foley's, you know, Have a Nice Day, a tale of blood and sweat socks as we're going to get. I'm not saying it's on that grand level. I mean, the first Foley book was an epic. It's an Odysseus-like adventure. Moxley's book is not quite there. It's not there really at all, but I'm just saying, for his generation, Moxley does feel like a throwback. And he's not always playing a goddamn video game and so forth. And he's not, apparently not worried too much about his social media like some of these wrestlers. And so forth. So, I mean, I did enjoy it, okay? So I liked it. I mean, what the fuck can I tell you? I liked his audiobook. I mean, I have friends that don't like John Moxley. Some of my friends. I'm not sure if it was my buddy who said this or Jim Cornette, but said that he looks like a plumber. You know, and I get it. I mean, where he's wearing that kind of, you know, white tank top and the jeans. He does kind of look like a plumber, but, you know, he's a good wrestler. I feel that a lot of the best AEW moments or matches, per se, have been Moxley-oriented. I mean, the CM Punk matches, I think 2 or 3 matches with Bryan Danielson as foes and as partners. I mean, I think Moxley is really the MVP of AEW from the get-go, pretty much. You know, I think didn't he first appear at the whatever the fuck, like the All Out? So I'm going to say read his book.